I decided to do something a little different with this question. I did not give you any part of the passage. I only gave you the blurb that would come before the passage, just to show you that sometimes this could be a really helpful piece of information. We still have a whole passage question where we see, okay, like what's the main idea? Now, if we have the whole passage, obviously we would have done a bunch of other questions and gotten a lot of more information. But let's see what we can do just seeing the blurb. What matters here? Well, we have a title of an article. Mysterious forest dweller uses sun stripes to hide among the foliage. Now let's look at the answer choices and see if anything maybe feels out of place with this limited title that we get. In choice A, contrast the foraging habits of animal species that use camouflage with the foraging habits of those that do not. Well, animal species, multiple species? It seems like in the title that we're only talking about one forest dweller, right? That sounds like a singular thing, a singular type of animal. So maybe this is a bit of a leap, but I also don't see anything about foraging habits in the title, right? That's how this thing eats. So it's talking about it being hidden and camouflaging itself with stripes, so maybe that part is right, camouflage, but I don't see anything about its diet, how it eats. So look, again, if we had the full passage and it talked a lot about how it ate, then maybe this is a more compelling choice. But just in this limited information, I don't see anything that justifies these kind of ideas that are in choice A. Looking at choice B, the main purpose is to evaluate the methods biologists use to understand the diet of okapis in the wild. Well, an okapi, you might not know this, is a type of animal, and so this is probably the animal that we're talking about, but I purposely picked an animal here that you probably wouldn't know because it really doesn't matter. It's not about the particular animal here. What they're talking about is, again, the diet of these things, and that it's not really what's going on in the title. They're talking about how it disguises itself, what it looks like, its stripes. So the diet, that's a bit of a leap. Again, probably the passage does talk about what it eats in some way, but if the title isn't talking about it, could it really be the main idea? It's a bit of a stretch. Looking at choice C, recount a series of experiments that compare how various forest species utilize striped patterns. Well, the striped thing sounds pretty good, right? So that seems very tempting. But again, it's about the number, right? I don't care whether it's an okapi or some other animal. The title seems to suggest we are talking about one species, and yet this seems to be talking about multiple, various forest species. And I bet that this passage would compare and contrast, very briefly, the okapi to other animals that have stripes. But I bet that that's one sentence in one paragraph, and that is not enough to make something the main idea. And this is a key point that a lot of people forget. They remember specific moments, specific facts, especially things that they understood very well, but that doesn't mean it was a main idea. Main ideas are repeated ideas. So unless that comes up again and again in multiple paragraphs, it's probably not going to be the answer to a question like this, which brings us to choice D. Describe a study that explains how a particular species has evolved to avoid predators. So a particular species, that's probably the okapi, the forest dweller that we are talking about in the title. And then how has it evolved to avoid predators? Well, probably the sun stripes that it's using to hide among the foliage, right? So it doesn't quite say the word camouflage here, but it's very clearly capturing that same idea. This is a classic SAT move. They're not just going to repeat exactly what they said, either in the blurb, in the title, in the passage itself. They're going to use synonyms, similar ways of expressing the same idea, and so you have to be comfortable with that. D, just based on this blurb, is a very strong choice. It is certainly better than the other three. And again, a little bit of an asterisk here. If we had the passage and it went a different way, we would have to follow what the passage is saying. But especially if you're reading a passage and you are confused or overwhelmed or just having trouble getting down to the choices, remember that these blurbs can sometimes be very, very informative, and you can absolutely use them to help you answer main idea questions, especially on science passages, because scientists don't mess around. They just tell you out front what they're trying to do, so that way you don't have to guess. That's what science is all about, getting to truth fast. And so there you go. The main idea, that's the kind of thing that they want you to know very quickly, and so it's usually going to be right in the title.